Hello and welcome to this Guess Who's Back edition of the Purple Journal podcast. I am your host, Joe Johnson, owner of purplePTSD.com, periodic writer for VikingsTerritory.com, general Facebook creep, here with our what seems like a special guest, Mr. Joe Oberly, who has been missing the last few weeks, and we've been missing him.
Hello and welcome to this. Oh, wait. That's Joe's line. God, I've been gone so long, I forgot which Joe I was.
Yeah, it actually sounds a lot better than when I do it. Joe writes for us. He writes for the Sports Post, more importantly. And we're super glad to have him back on the show. I can't say the same thing about Luke Braun, who is also on the show, unfortunately.
I'm here. I exist, though.
He writes for us. Obviously, it's our podcast. It makes sense. And he also hosts his own podcast, the Infinite Monkeys podcast, which you should definitely check out. It's on our website.
It's weird.
I said that with a question mark at the end because I don't know.
It's also,
but it is.
I believe, in the same RSS feed as this podcast, so it's easy to go get. And it's only like 10 minutes a pop, so...
Not a huge, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. Anyway, so, God.
You ever just give up on a thought?
Yeah, it's been, seems like 2.5 weeks since our last show, so I'm kind of rusty, but a lot of stuff has happened. It's been, after the free agency started and all the crazy news and rumors, it kind of slowed down a bit, but there's still some juicy topics out there to cover, so... Let's get into it, I guess, with about the enthusiasm of a dying cat. Joe Mixon.
Joe Mixon.
Good
name.
Yeah, and it seems to be... Well, first of all, the reason that we're bringing him up is
That's kind of my analysis right there. He's got a good first name.
Wow. That's all that matters.
This is an all-time name draft.
Yeah. I've always had a theory when it comes to, the draft and prospects. You look at, Blake Bortles. In my head, I'm like, I can't imagine, people walking around in a Bortles jersey. His name just doesn't seem like somebody who's going to end up doing anything, if that makes any sense. I can't see Blake Bortles in a Papa John's commercial.
What about Jake Butt? I
would take him. Or the kicker.
He's probably a pretty good player, but his name is Jake Butt.
That's perfect, though.
What does he play? What position?
Tight end.
If he ever fumbles, is that a butt fumble?
Absolutely.
And come on, tight end, butt. Come on.
It's so good.
There's a kicker. I forget for what team in college that's last name is Blewett, and I thought that was perfect.
I thought he was a basketball player. Didn't he play for Gonzaga or someone?
Well, there might be two, but I definitely saw a kicker a couple months ago. It was Bluitt, Blewett, and it's pronounced Blewett. So
it's
seems like the
that's
Vikings
the worst
draft
sports
him.
name of all time.
It has to be. He must have gone into kicking just as a joke. The coincidence is too strong. But anyway, back to Joe Mixon. I guess we're talking about him because there's been some reports today. In the last few weeks, honestly, the Vikings are interested in the troubled running back out of Oklahoma. There's been a lot of teams that have come out and said that, they're not going to draft him regardless. He's not on their draft board, and he's just got too much baggage because he punched a woman in the face and really, really injured her in 2014, and so. He kind of seems like a pariah, and so there's been a lot of people who are questioning why the Vikings would even show any interest in somebody like that. Regardless of the fact that some people say he's the most well-rounded running back, I guess, in the draft.
Think Le'Veon Bell.
Yeah.
Very close to Le'Veon Bell. Size-wise, versatility, the talent, he's very close to Le'Veon Bell.
And I just wrote an article basically saying that, I would want him on the team, and I know that I'm going to get people saying that, well, you're letting your desire for the team to have good players outweigh the fact that some of these guys aren't the best people in the world, and that's not really even where my rationale is. Now, I admit that has something to do with it. It has to. It's a bias that I can't escape, but at the same time, I feel like, not to get too in-depth with, I'm a sociology of law major, so like I always had to write papers about like how society affects law and whatnot. But I do believe in second chances, and my main thing is if we were to draft him, that means that he must have done and said enough of the right things to pass Zimmer's eye test. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think Zimmer would let him come if he was like high at the meeting and really awful.
They both, Zimmer and Spielman, were down at his pro day. You guys probably talked about that, and now we have this report from Ian Rappaport that they're one of 4 teams that are interested. But I don't know. I don't think with the Vikings' first pick in the draft they would go that route in a very running back heavy draft. I think after what they did with Latavius Murray and signing him, and I think they will go for a running back in the draft, but I don't think they would go that high. And it sounds like he might still be there in the late second round when the Vikings pick, middle second, whenever it is. But 48th.
Do you think? I mean, looking at Rappaport's report, that I don't know how to take the fact that he said 4 teams are interested. Does that mean only 4? There's only 4 teams, or that he only knows of 4 teams? Because I was thinking, if it's only 4 teams, how is he gonna? He could fall to the 5th round. I mean, if there's just 4 teams.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would tend to agree with that. It might be the only ones that he's heard about, and I still think it's maybe a bit of a smokescreen. But I mean, do you think the Vikings, if he's there at 48, you think they'd grab onto him? I mean, is he that good? Is he that much of a game changer, Luke? You described him as Le'Veon Bell.
At 48 in the middle of the second round, yeah, he's phenomenal value. I think he's probably the 3rd best running back in the class. I think is the kind of the consensus, maybe 4th, depending on how you feel about Dalvin Cook. But like you have Christian McCaffrey and Leonard Fournette are the 2 guys that are going to be the running backs like at the very top. And then it's kind of Joe Mixon next, and it just depending on if your team is willing to like deal with the moral thing. So yeah, I mean at 48 he'd be a phenomenal value and maybe too good to pass up. I'd also add that even though the last couple of years the Vikings draft habits have been to kind of like avoid these Marcus Peters and like La'el Collins and that whole deal, Mike Zimmer himself made kind of a name for himself in Cincinnati, taking chances on these like pariahs, like
Pac-Man Jones.
Yeah, Vontaze Burfict. Like he kind of is. It's not like that's new territory for him. So if the Vikings do decide to go take a chance on Mixon and try to make him like the redemption story rather than he's the next asshole making $1 million story. Zimmer's kind of a guy that could do that. That could turn him into that.
Joe, has he kept his nose clean since 2014?
Yeah, I mean it's hard to say. Because
not quite. He had one other thing. I don't remember if it was before or after.
It was a parking thing.
Yeah, and he would it was like his problem is an anger management one, not a domestic violence one. Which I don't know which one's worse, but it's definitely different, and you have to think about it differently.
Well, they're almost one and the same, because one leads to the other. But yeah,
but it's not like if he had a wife, he'd be beating her every night. It's like he freaks out, and then we'll have like an episode of he'll pop a bolt and have these anger issues. But it's a little bit more about anger and a little bit less about like he doesn't respect women or anything like that.
Yeah, because what happened?
It's an important distinction to make to understand where he's coming from and what his problems are.
What happened was this was last year. He got a parking ticket and he walked out as the ticket was being written and he grabbed it and he ripped it up and threw it. So that's
he got in trouble for it.
Yeah,
that's it.
It said
his college got him in trouble for it. It was like the college parking person, and they didn't like that he ripped up the ticket.
Some of the ticket hit the attendant. One of the pieces did. So it's a Randy Moss.
He also had a pretty high profile moment at the Sugar Bowl a couple years ago, where the other fans. This was like in the wake of his incident, and I think Auburn was the other school, and the Auburn fans were saying like he hits women. They were like chanting, "He hits women." He hits women, and he was up right next to the crowd, like yelling at him and in their face and stuff, and he was like very clear that he couldn't handle himself. So there's definitely an anger issue, and you'd have to work through it, and you'd have to be the kind of leader and the kind of mentor to work through it. I think Mike Zimmer is that guy, though.
Doesn't this put the Vikings right back into the place they were with Adrian Peterson? That they just
Oklahoma running backs with violence issues? No.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm talking about for fans that really were down on Adrian Peterson. You know, he goes and they finally get out from under this cloud of whatever they felt they were under, that AP was on the team and he was a child beater, blah, 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 blah. Well, he's gone. All right. We're the Vikings again and we feel good about ourselves. And, now we've got a wife beater instead at running back.
I feel like, with the Adrian Peterson thing, like, I saw somebody on my Twitter feed or my Facebook feed a couple of minutes ago saying Pepsi should thank United Airlines because no one's talking about the Pepsi commercial anymore. They're talking about that guy getting dragged off the plane. And it's the same thing with, like, the quote-unquote outrage over Adrian Peterson. Like, there's this, like, crazy mob of people online that just go from one incident to another and type about how angry they are, and then they kind of forget about it. Like, I don't think, with Adrian Peterson, that was like an ongoing thing. With people were mad at first, and they were mad at the reaction, but they forget about it because people have they don't pay attention for very long. So,
Typing when they're angry, I don't know what that's like, Joe. Just kidding.
But it's good.
I think there's a difference between with those people. They're thinking that when he gets drafted, the team who drafted him is providing him amnesty. And I think there's a difference between amnesty and redemption, or like an opportunity for redemption. The team is trying to take an opportunity to be, hey, I'm the coach that, set Joe Mixon straight.
Yeah.
And I think there's an opportunity in your own reputation there, and a selfish opportunity to be the guy who fixed the trouble kid and the mentor, and then other, people want to trust you. And I think it's important to see, like, when a team does draft him, and I think that's why the Vikings are interested. They want to be able to be that guy and say, hey, we unlocked this talent even though he had all these problems.
Do you think so?
And
I don't mean to butt in, but I don't. For me, with Zimmer, it's you spoke of his history, which is very sound, and for me, I think it's like Zimmer. If he's a ball player, I'm going to go down and interview him, and he says the right things to me. I'm going to draft him. I don't know if Zimmer's motivation is he wants to be the guy who is redeemed him. I don't know.
That's just fair. Or maybe he thinks he can be. He's confident in his ability to do that.
Yeah, and I guess I was going to bring up earlier, and Joe kind of touched on this, but I wonder how much these decisions are weighed against, like, what people in Minnesota would think about it. Like the reaction from the fans, if they're really that worried about it. They got their stadium. They don't really need to have, I think they can handle some outrage from people on Facebook, for Christ's sake. But I just wonder how much that feeds into it, and the fact that Minnesota is a pretty liberal market, and that people really don't want to deal with a lot of that stuff. I just wonder how much that affects the decision making that they make, if it does at all. I'm just I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. They brought back Peterson, and in the face of a lot of criticism, and they went down there and walked into his doors, and so
gave him more money too.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't know how that happened still, but speaking of Peterson, I guess he's been having a lot of different meetings with teams that are despicable. The Saints, yesterday he left without a contract. That didn't make a lot of sense. He wouldn't fit on that offense anyway. But I wrote an article about a week ago, I think. I don't know. It's all a blur, but about the more this goes on, the more I think that essentially it's going to come down to him returning to the Vikings or going to the Patriots if the price is low enough. I based a lot of that on the article that you wrote, Luke, about the fact that Latavius Murray isn't a plug-and-play replacement for Peterson in regards to what he brings to the offense, and that the Vikings essentially still need to either draft or acquire more of a thumping running back who isn't going to be out there to do the other that you put in your article. So if you kind of want to just explain, I guess, why Latavius Murray, again, just real quick, we did this already, but why he would be a fit, and am I crazy to think that if his price is low enough, the Vikings would bring him back and maybe draft a running back behind him?
Yeah, so you can get an idea of the way teams were using running backs by looking at what they were doing when they were on the field, because they had a certain number of snaps, and on some of those snaps they catch a pass, some of those snaps they do a run, some of those snaps they do other stuff. Latavius Murray did other stuff more than Adrian Peterson did, and Adrian Peterson ran more as a greater chunk of his snaps than Latavius Murray did.
Yeah.
So you can essentially say that like the role that Latavius Murray fills looks more like Matt Asiata, but like supercharged. So we have supercharged Matt Asiata. That's our main running back now.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's quite an image.
Yeah, like Hulk him out, turn green, like one of those old Surge commercials.
Pick up more than 3 yards every single time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, do you guys? There seems to be a lot of people on our Facebook feed. We have about 7,000 people following us on Facebook now, and AJ Mansour wrote an article that basically said how low is Peterson willing to go to continue to play football in regards to salary. That was the title, though, and a lot of people saw the headline and didn't read the article, and it was like, how dare you insult Adrian Peterson? People got really angry, and then I clarified. I actually talked to them and said, hey, we weren't saying how low, like, in an insulting way. It was about the salary, and in the end, it's basically just talking about why he hasn't been signed. It wasn't insulting him, but my point is that it seems to be a lot of people that really do want Peterson back on the team and that would be happy with him coming back. So I don't know if that's even a possibility, but I
don't think it is. I guess
kinda...
I think they've moved on.
Yeah. They've brought in like 7 running backs to interview for they're drafting a running back, and that'll be 3, and it won't be Peterson.
That's I wrote
they want someone who can block and catch the ball, and Peterson can't do it. And I'm sure there was a canyon between them, and as far as a price for him to come back. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. The list of prospects that the Vikings have met with thus far for the draft was released or leaked or whatever, and Luke just referenced that. And they've met with 31 people so far. Only a few of those are quote-unquote official meetings because they only get 30 official meetings. But
a lot of them are local guys, which don't count toward your official meetings.
And some of them were just like East-West games and stuff like that. But
yeah,
out of the 31 people they met with 7 running backs, like you said, and then I think 6 receivers and a ton of safeties. So that'll actually come up in a little bit when we talk about like the draft and the needs and stuff. But yeah, I don't know. When it comes to Peterson, it's kind of like a pipe dream for me for him to come back because I am a fan of his. But
I think.
Do you think he's got? I mean, what's he gonna do? I guess is the question.
I think he has a better chance of playing for the Edmonton Oilers than he does for the Vikings.
It seems like Marshawn Lynch is kind of taking away any chances that he has. It seems, he's the Raiders might get him, but it also has been reported that the Patriots are interested in him. So it seems
the Saints are still talking to him. He left New Orleans without a deal, but the Saints are still talking to him. I think the Saints could still happen.
Peterson?
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know why they would do that. That seems like a horrible move for them because he doesn't fit anything at all for them. But I don't know, whatever.
Quick question going backwards just a little bit. Sorry, Joe. Mixon wasn't invited to the combine.
Correct.
And the Vikings and Spielman both went out to his pro day. Wasn't there a boatload of other representatives there?
I mean, it was Oklahoma's pro day. Everybody was there, but they spent a lot of time specifically with Mixon.
Yeah.
Okay.
They had an official meeting. They left the field and went and sat down somewhere.
Yeah.
So.
There's a picture of Zimmer and Mixon walking out of the building together, and it's really cute.
Yeah. But as for Peterson, the one last thing I thought was interesting is that New England made him do a tryout or a workout, to see. I don't know if they figured he wasn't he pulled a Lacey and just got really fat.
That's standard for any free agent prospect. That isn't one of the first 3 days, or somebody old. It's not too
yeah,
unusual.
I figured it was because he was older. I don't think that's something he did with the Saints or anyone else really, but I don't know. Seemed like they're a little bit more interested. If you put him through a workout, because at first it was reported that it was just a guy kicking the tires, hey, how you doing? We're not really interested, but we'll kind of humor you because you're Adrian Peterson. But I don't know. Maybe they were just humoring
he did not do a workout in New Orleans, only in New England.
Yeah.
How many offers he's had, if any? If they've even gotten that far with him, because boy, he's running the gamut here.
Yeah,
he's run through no Minnesota, no on Seattle, no on the Giants, no on the Bucks, no on the Patriots, the Saints, so many teams.
And there hasn't been any reports of any offers at all. And you think that would come out because everything comes out. So yeah, no, I don't think anyone's made any offers. I think it's kind of like Luke said, a lot of these teams, he just, and if it was 1995, I'm sure he would have been picked up by now. But how many teams run an I formation enough to have Peterson in their offense. There's maybe 5 or 6 teams that do it even 50% of the time now. He can't play out of the shotgun. A lot of teams like to run the shotgun. I mean, even the Patriots run the shotgun a ton. So, yeah, it just seems like he's a dinosaur, basically.
I still think he might get a shot, come training camp, first few games of the season, someone gets injured. He's sitting up there. Yeah, I really think that.
I think, it could even be before that. It could be like before after the draft, somebody isn't happy with the running backs they got, and they'll go, see what's up with him. But I think it's more likely what you said, Joe. Like, it'll be like 4 days before week 1, and somebody will sign him on at the last second and then say you don't need to know the playbook because we're going to run 2 plays with you.
Oh no, Latavius Murray's surgery doesn't go well, and he can't.
Yeah.
He can't make opening day.
Oh no, Le'Veon Bell's suspended. We need a backup quick.
Joe Mixon uppercutted crossing guard. Well, I guess that's was just kind of a big question I had. And speaking of questions, and the best segue I've ever had, Joe Oberle wrote an article about basically off-season questions and focusing on the offense.
Killing it with these segues, though.
Oh, dude, I'm just in the zone right now. It's going to be a multiple-part article, and there's the first one, but just kind of covering the offense and where it's at and that sort of thing. So if Joe wants to kind of explain
I guess I basically went through all the different positions on the offense and looked at what questions there were and to see what holes they had to fill. And surprisingly enough, I found holes in just about every position.
Yay!
Going down there. But the only one I really didn't think there was a big need was running back, and I thought, they might take one later in the draft, and can certainly talk to Luke about that after a bit. But they got to get depth for the line in a draft that's really not very deep in offensive linemen. They need. I kind of missed on Truesdell. He might fill the need for a pass-catching tight end, so they not have to necessarily get one in the draft. I originally thought they did, but that may not be the case.
They picked him
he's
up
the
in
arena football guy, right?
Veteran combine, yeah.
Yeah, he's the arena football guy, right, Truesdell?
I think so.
Yeah.
And then we got another, not quite Mobo, but, similar, where he can't play football, but he's, ridiculously big and fast.
Yeah, the receiver, Mitch something.
Mitch Matthews, I think.
Mitch Matthews, yeah. It's
Mitch McConnell.
It's written with
the I'm not supposed to talk about politics. I'm sorry.
Oh, but could you imagine a Senate football game?
I just had a
Who would
mental
be the
image
quarterback?
of Trump. I'm sure. No,
it would be Paul Ryan running the read option, and he would crush everyone.
Or Pence. Well, Pence would have to be the ref because he's the vice president. He has the final vote during.
And
the
he
tie.
just looks like a ref.
And Mitch McConnell looks like a turtle, so you could be a running back.
Yeah, no, Paul Ryan run the read option. He'd torch everybody.
P90X. He's a big P90X guy. He
Joe's best segue and our best tangent ever, right there.
That really went off the rails quickly.
Well, I mean, it's the veteran
Paul
combine.
Ryan running the read offense or the read only offense.
That needs to be the title of the. Let's get some clicks.
I'm gonna shout this out to my best friend who listens to the show. It's a quote from college that he always uses for me. I was super drunk and I was arguing politics with this kid who was a big Republican. I was a stereotypical U of M drunk liberal, and I ended up screaming because we were talking about football. Never mind, because I don't remember what the quote is. Basically, it was John Kerry.
That was a real good story.
I know.
Yeah.
This is why I'm alone.
Nice tease, Joe.
Wow.
I wanted to appeal to my only friend, and I forgot the one thing that keeps us together. But anyway.
So
as I was saying, wide receivers, the Vikings have to get somebody now in the draft, which is usually not hard to find in the draft. They need, I said quarterback, yes, but only if there's something worth wasting a pick on. I mean, I think they're set at quarterback with the first 3 players, but you always have to be drafting a quarterback, so they say, and trying some of these guys out. I'm not a big believer in Heineke to ever lead this offense one day. I'm okay with Keenum as backup. And
you wrote an article about Keenum, too.
Oh, yeah, yes, I did.
I already forgot he was on the team.
Yeah, I kind of did, too. I mean, doesn't that make us kind of okay at quarterback, or do you think they're really going to bring someone else in? And if they do, does that mean Heineke's finished? Because a lot of people love Heinicke.
It's a competition.
Yeah, exactly, Luke. It's a competition. They brought in what's his face last year, Scott Stipe, or what was the Wisconsin quarterback?
That's the lead singer of Creed.
Well, they brought him in too. I saw him in Minnesota. I just heard this philosophy for some teams is, you should almost draft one every year and try them out and see if they have, what it takes. I don't know how the draft is in quarterbacks. I wouldn't want to spend a high draft pick on it. Maybe a late compensatory pick they got. I don't know. But
there are some low guys that we can try.
Yeah, I'm fine with where they're at quarterback wise, but I think you kick some tires on that most important position. But you don't kick in windows of your door.
Yeah, that was bad. That might be the end of the Heinicke.
He did it stupid, as he said.
That is a stupid. That could have cost him like a real opportunity.
Oh, could have cost him.
And maybe the only one he gets if he loses his Case Keenum.
Totally.
Exactly.
Well, with that
that's the deal, and I don't know if Luke wants to, if we want to head to the draft scenario now where we quiz Luke, but Joe, I'm sorry, I don't want to take over the show here.
No, that's exactly what I was going to do. Basically, since we're talking about needs, and I'm still blushing so hard that I'm lightheaded from my inability to remember my story.
You're never going to recover from that in your whole life.
No, it's like when you remember things from your childhood and you get goosebumps and feel really awkward, or when you fell down in front of your classmates or something like that. Just happened to me. And
I never did.
I'm still drowning in it. It had something to do with John Kerry and Keyshawn Johnson. I don't remember the punchline, but apparently it's good enough to maintain a friendship for 10 years. But looking at the offense, really, I mean, like Joe said, there's a lot more holes than I think people realize. And we, brought in Mitch Matthews. He's a project. Bo Ringer's a project. Treadwell is a project, unfortunately, even though he's supposed to be the most pro-ready guy. Really, all we have going for us, Jarius Wright and Thielen and Stephon Diggs. So I guess when it comes to the draft and talking about the fact that they met with 6 different receivers so far out of 31 people, we'll kind of talk about the different needs in the draft. Let's start with that one, Luke. I mean, what do you think?
Receivers, that's the one I know the least about. I know that the 3 guys that are going to go before us, I'm not even going to talk about. It's Carlos Henderson, John Ross, and Corey Davis. Or I'm sorry, Chris Godwin, John Ross, and Corey Davis. I'm not even going to talk about those guys because they're going to go in the top 15.
What do you think about? I want to put this out there first because I've written an article about this, and apparently the Vikings used one of their official visits with the guy that I have basically put out there as the guy I want more than anyone in the draft, and I'm going to push until the draft is the wide receiver Curtis Samuel.
Oh, that's my guy too. That was the first one I was going to talk about.
I've talked about him a couple times on the show and kind of framed him as a running back and wide receiver because he can do both, and he can return kicks. He didn't do that the last year or maybe 2, but I know his first 2 years at Ohio State he did return kicks. He just seems to fit if we do have a lot of needs. Like
he's
Joe
Percy
said,
Harvin. Percy Harvin.
Man, without the bipolar disorder and the migraines.
Yes, and with significantly less talent, but the same style.
Yes.
But Percy Harvin was insane.
Going off of what Joe said about having needs at every position, that extends to special teams. Obviously, with Cordero Patterson gone. And so you look at a guy like Samuel who can maybe fill in a bit at running back too in regards to not maybe the thumper role, but kind of change of pace guy that can house it every time he gets the ball.
You have to look at
He's
and wide receiver. I mean, he'd be a great.
Yeah.
He's 5'11", I think.
He's too small to play true running back and to be 30 carries a game. He can't take that much punishment. But he also can't really thrive outside or against press. He needs to be in the slot and running slants and running bubble screens and stuff. So as a gadget play, I mean he would be a Cordero Patterson upgrade, but not as good of a kick returner. Okay. Which is kind of what we want from him, right? You want him to be able to contribute on offense, and if he isn't as good of a kick returner, that's worth it. But
it's going to be next to impossible to find a kick returner that's as good as Patterson.
Right, exactly. So, like, he'll probably fall because, like, if you need a running back, you're going to pick Leonard Fournette, you're going to pick Christian McCaffrey, you're going to, these first-round running backs are going to go before Curtis Samuel. And if you need a receiver, there's, like, 4 guys you're going to take in front of Curtis Samuel as well. But he's like weapon. His position is offensive weapon.
Yeah.
And I love that because that's the kind, like, in a West Coast like Pat Shurmur runs, that's perfect,
Mm-hmm.
Give me a bubble screen, give me a crossing route, let him, create yards after the catch. Try to move him around the field and get a mismatch, or just line him up in the backfield in shotgun and give him a read option or something. Not a read option because we have Sam Bradford, but like give him a handoff out of the shotgun and see what he can do with that, or a jet sweep. Like, there's kind of all these ways that you can get him involved and be creative. And one of the biggest needs on offense is we need, like, an identity. We haven't had that in 3 years since Adrian Peterson.
We don't have a playmaker, to be honest. I mean,
yeah.
I love Diggs. I actually really like Diggs. I mean,
he's phenomenal intermediate receiver, but he's not an identity of an offense.
Yeah, he's
Curtis Samuel was the identity of OSU, and that's, like, not a small school to be the identity of that offense.
Mm-hmm.
You would need to, like, manufacture some touches, but, like, that's okay. Make a defense respect him, and then suddenly Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs have an easier time getting open.
Yeah, and I have a theory too. I mean, playing at Ohio State, you have the pressure of being on the Buckeyes, and you play against a higher level of talent than a lot of other teams, with the Big Ten defenses being really strong, especially lately, and going to big bowl games and whatnot. So, like you said, man, the fact that he was like the Randall Cobb of the old Randall Cobb anyway, back when people loved him on fantasy
football. Ty Montgomery.
Yeah, I mean, the Vikings, like I said, they just don't have that. They have basically, and it showed last season, that's why they were, picking up small chunk yardage, because they didn't have anybody who could stretch the field or do anything, and that shuts down every aspect of the offense, to be honest. So
nothing, demanded respect.
Yeah, I mean, we have 2 really great possession receivers. I think that's what it is. We need a guy who can stretch the field, and obviously he's too small to be like Alshon Jeffrey, which would have been an awesome pickup, but he can do it in other ways, and I think that's really the first thing the Vikings needed to address with the draft, is finding playmakers for the offense, especially with how Bradford's been playing. He deserves that help, I think, too.
He's definitely not a very good deep threat because he's too short and he can't really do that, like, high point the ball thing.
Yeah.
But that's okay. A lot of teams have kind of been moving away from, like, that deep ball, like, if you look at, like, what the Lions do, they're all yards after the catch oriented offense, and I think the Vikings could definitely move that way.
And if you look at his highlights, a lot of his stuff is just across, like, dump offs across the middle that he turns into, like, a big play, and that's something that, like you said, last season we didn't have a lot of yards after the catch and stuff like that. So
yeah. So the thing about Curtis Samuel is he might not fall to 48, and if you're going to take him, you have to take him at 48 if he even gets there. So if you want to maybe invest a little bit less, there's Zay Jones is a guy I see in mocks a lot. He's kind of more of a West Coast. I mean, he's kind of like Jarius Wright. He's a West Coasty guy. He's, I guess Jarius Wright, he called himself a deep threat on Twitter, but he's fast, but, like, I don't know, he's kind of he's limited. And who's the other guy? I see Tawan Taylor sometimes mocked to us because he is that deep threat. He's like a vertical threat, but he's definitely a lower. He'd be like a 5th, 6th round kind of guy that hopefully you can, have him run a 9 route every once in a while, get him on the field, and see if you can take the top off.
Okay. And, I mean, what do you think of, have you looked at, like, some of the receivers that they've met with so far? I mean, do you think there's anyone in there?
I have no idea who. I know. Did they meet with Juju Smith-Schuster? I don't want that guy at all.
They did. I can tell you right now who they met with.
Juju Smith-Schuster is he's like Treadwell exactly, and I really don't want them to go that direction again.
Yeah, I mean, so basically, I can tell you they've met with Rodney Adams from South Florida, Chad Williams from Grambling, Curtis Samuel. Who else? Let's see here.
Yeah, I love that they met with Curtis Samuel because that means that they're looking to get creative.
Yeah, I mean, Amba Etta-Tawo from Syracuse. And that's
I really don't want Juju Smith-Schuster. He's, like, slow and can't jump. Like,
Luke, they can't take a wide receiver with their first pick, can they? Doesn't that send a really bad message?
Only if it's Curtis Samuel, because I think he's a talent. It's not like he's replacing Treadwell or anything. He's just because he's got the same letters next to his name. It's a totally different position. I don't think anybody else makes any sense. Some people have said like Carlos Henderson, but they've been like national media guys who have clearly never watched a Vikings game.
Yeah.
And Carlos Henderson he's more of like a deep threat kind of guy, but he ran a 4.46 40, which is, okay. It's like basically Adam Thielen speed.
Speaking of national people not paying attention to the Vikings, I have to bring this up because it completely like summed up the way I feel about national writers talking about the Vikings because we're so invisible. But I came across an article on Yahoo that I think it was on Cheat Sheet through Yahoo, and it said 4 teams that may never win the Super Bowl, and the Vikings obviously were on the list. And his explanation was the Vikings in 2017 have a great young roster with Teddy Bridgewater and Adrian Peterson, but once Peterson retires, they're going to go into a horrible rebuilding mode. And it's like, what? How does he not? How can he cover the NFL and not know that Teddy Bridgewater almost died a year ago, and that
that's
Adrian
amazing.
Peterson is like riding trains?
It's
around.
like he copy pasted something from 2015.
That's my article. I said he thinks it's 2015. So that
it's like he just had that in his drafts and accidentally posted it or something.
Yeah, or he
like
just had,
in the depths of his draft
he had
page.
a deadline and copy and pasted something he wrote a couple of years ago. But that that's I guess how I feel about national media anyway. But I wanted to ask you, Luke, to segue back to what we were talking about in regards to needs. Obviously, running back is important, and I think the last show that we did, in regards to Joe Mixon in Oklahoma, you said that maybe it's a sneaky move because they might be interested in the other running
Perine,
back.
Yeah. Samaje Perine, yeah.
And
so he's more of a 4th or 5th round guy.
Too, so.
They did meet with him as well. This is totally my tinfoil theory that it's all smoke with Mixon and they really were at Oklahoma to look at this guy.
Yeah.
Because he fits that thumper role that Latavius Murray doesn't do, and Oakland didn't have him do that. He's definitely a less. Hang on, let me get his.
That's going to be a problem though, Luke. Spelling his name, that's a problem.
Samaje, I believe.
Yeah, it's Samaje. That's what you said, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, Samaje Perine is like, he's kind of a thumper, and he'd be great to get in like with our 2nd, 4th round pick. He doesn't jump off the board athletically, and he'll fall because of that. But when he played on the same team as Mixon, and when he came in as relief to Mixon, it was kind of like a D'Angelo Williams, Le'Veon Bell situation, and he could always produce, which is exactly what we'd have him do here. He'd come in to relieve Latavius Murray and Jerick McKinnon, and he'd just come in every once in a while, like in the 3rd quarter when you need to start putting a game away or whatever. And he could always produce, and always, he could be a guy that like he'll get you 4, and it'll always be a reasonable run, and he won't try to bounce it outside or doing anything ridiculous. Kind of be like an Adrian Peterson style, but we would use him the same amount everybody else is using their thumper.
Okay, and what do you think about it? Another running back that the team met with privately. They didn't meet with Perine privately. They met with him at the Combine. But there's the Wisconsin running back who, speaking of spelling problems, Joe, Dare or Dare Ogunbowale?
Yeah, good luck.
Oh, God, I don't know a thing about him.
Oh, well, he hasn't played much, but he seems to be like the thumper role, which is why I was interested in him. Plus, my bias towards the Big Ten dominates my entire life.
What's his name?
Dare, D-A-R-A, like dare. Dare to get
Dare.
on drugs. A goon, like, okay, I'll spell it. Ogunbowale.
Oh, wow, that's a good name.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know much about him at all.
I don't think he played a
I
lot,
wouldn't
but...
wanna speak to it.
All right, well, who else do you think, outside of Mixon and...
So, I don't think they
Perine?
should go running back at 48 unless it's Mixon. And just because of Mixon's talent, and we kind of already talked about his whole deal. And if they're going to go Mixon, they'd have to go 48, but I don't think they're going to go anywhere else. They also met with Alvin Kamara, who is very much like Jerick McKinnon, and that worries a lot of people, but there is kind of a thing that they, like the same thing they did with like Mackenzie Alexander. McKinnon's entering a contract year, so if they did draft Alvin Kamara, he would then become the guy after a year, and Jerick McKinnon, we'd probably just let him go make money elsewhere, and then we still have our guy for cheap.
Yeah.
So that's a guy they've been looking at. Dante Foreman is another one that's kind of a 4th round, 5th round guy, also the thumper-ish type person. It does seem like we're going on day 3. A lot of the guys that we've met with are day 3 picks. Some people are projecting Alvin Kamara in like the 1st, and I do not get that at all.
Yeah.
Some people really want Kareem Hunt. He's
they met with him too, right?
I believe they did meet with him
privately.
He's just like a bowling ball. I mean, he's like an up the middle, like just he'll run you over. He does have a certain amount of versatility, though. He's not like only that. So there's a lot of options. This running back class is absolutely ridiculous. To give you an idea of how ridiculous it is, so there's a metric called Spark, which is, I don't want to explain like how it works and all the math, but it's a lot of complicated math, and it's an athleticism score.
Okay.
There are 24 running backs in this class that are above average athletes, like above average NFL athletes.
Okay.
It's just ridiculously deep. So if you don't want to go Mixon, and you would go Mixon because he's like definitely a guy that would be a starter for you, and he will, he just seems like he will absolutely contribute, so he would be worth a high pick. And then after that, there's just like 1,000 people. Oh my God, how did I forget to talk about my favorite guy, Jeremy McNichols? He's ridiculously athletic, and he can return kicks, and he would be kind of a scat back like Jerick McKinnon, but I also think redundancy at running back doesn't matter. Like, yay, now you have 2 of those guys. You can line them up next to each other. This is awesome.
Where did he go to school?
He went to school at Boise State.
Okay.
Are you seriously suggesting they get someone just like McKinnon?
Sure.
Why?
The redundancy doesn't really matter a lot.
Really?
Because you can line them up next to each other. They can, relieve for each other. If and then obviously if one gets hurt, that's great. And McKinnon's in a contract year. Like, I love McKinnon. Don't get me wrong. I love McKinnon. But he is in a contract year, and if you don't want to pay him and you want to have the same amount of value for the same amount of contract for 4 more years, you can draft one. Jeremy McNichols is also a 5th-round guy. Like, this is not a large investment.
God, with so many holes, though, I don't see him doing that. I think they would want different skills rather than having a redundancy, but that's just me.
He also can return kicks, which is not something McKinnon is really.
There you go. Yeah, that's something.
Yeah.
He practices it in camp, but he never does it.
I don't think people realize like how. I know that we've been without him for 2 of the last 3 seasons, but I think people like have a lot of expectations for Murray, and I think the fan base like has taken for granted how great Adrian Peterson has been, and I think if we go with like guys that just pick up 4 yards and can't really like cut and pick up extra yards or do anything special, that people are gonna kind of realize that we took Peterson for granted, and that comes into my mind. Talking about these guys just makes me. And this again is my bias, but I want somebody like Mixon. I want somebody who can help, change the offense a little bit, like add some fear into the defenses that we play. That maybe they can house the ball every time they touch the ball, like just playmakers. That's always been my bias. I always want playmakers. I want the best wide receiver, the best running back. So it'll be interesting to see how people react to the draft.
There are so many different directions we can go in this draft. I think the biggest takeaway that you should as a listener, the biggest thing you should take to your draft party with your work buddies or wherever you're going to watch it is it doesn't matter who gets taken in front of us. The Vikings will have an opportunity to get somebody good at 48, and if they play their cards even okay, not even perfectly, but just do well, they can walk away from the draft with 2 day 1 starters at least. Like, it's a very deep draft, and they can make it work. And if it's not on offense and it's not playmakers and they pick 2 defenders and they're 2 good defenders, that's fine.
Yeah.
But they can walk away with people who are immediately contributing.
Quick question about Peterson, Joe, and Luke. What do you want to happen to him? Joe, I guess you said earlier you wouldn't mind having him back on the team, but does any of you want to see him go to another team and see him get 1.2 yards per carry and say, okay, hey, the Vikings made the right decision, or or do you wish him well? Do you hope he goes and gets a ring? What do you think?
That's a hard question for me to answer because I as I've kind of explained a little bit, I have maybe a little bit of a hard time separating the personal from the professional, So personally, I can tell you, I don't think Adrian Peterson's the best guy in the world. I mean, he's got like how many kids out of wedlock, and he's done some bad things, and he seems to live in like a bubble of yes men that is kind of, I think, falling apart.
One time.
Exactly. I mean, I think that he's like he just lives in this unrealistic world that's falling apart as we speak because he's not getting what he thought he would. But that having been said, like I don't think I would take any pleasure in him going somewhere and being terrible. I grew. I'm 32. He's been on the team since 2007, the year after I graduated from college, and I still have like fond memories of him. So the reason I think he could come back, a lot of that's based on the fact that I think the need is there and he would contribute, and I don't necessarily agree with Luke that he's completely fallen off or that he's not going to be able to contribute. I don't think he's going to be the
I don't think
Peterson
that
from 2012, but I think a lot of people, not including you, Luke, look at like the first 2 games of last season and use that as a way to say, look, he was terrible. He got 30 yards, like he's over, and he did that in 2015 too, the first 2 games, and then he got the rushing record. I just think that the reason I want him back specifically, and I've touched on this, is we don't have playmakers. On offense, I think defenses would still respect Peterson until they need to know for a fact that he's not good anymore, and that the need is there for somebody like him. And considering how deep the draft is in the running back position, we could still draft somebody like Lucas said, 4th, 5th, 6th round, and they could, have sign Peterson to a 1-year deal and bring that guy in behind him. So I do want him back on the team for that reason. But if he went to another team like the Patriots, I'd feel okay if he, won a championship like Karl Malone tried to do. Like, it's sad he's not really the focus of the offense anymore, but he gets a ring by proxy. But I do think if he went to the Patriots, he would not pull like a Randy Moss, but I think he would contribute. I think he would surprise a lot of people. But I also think he would probably fumble in the Super Bowl and lose.
He'd get like 800 yards. He'd have a fine season.
Looking at what, not to keep going on about this, but looking at what, what's his face, the running back from the Patriots that it hasn't signed yet.
Blunt?
From Oregon. Yeah, Blunt. Blunt got 299 carries, I think, last season. Like, he got a lot more carries than people. People seem to think the offense goes through Brady solely, but they need a running back.
He had the biggest role in that offense.
Totally.
Their thumper was their biggest guy.
And
one of the few holdouts in the league on that.
And he got $1 million, didn't he, last year?
Yeah,
and now he can't find a job.
Well, they don't want to pay him, and I think he's right to hold out in that regard. But I think Peterson
he's worth it, yeah.
I think Peterson would be an upgrade over Blunt in the offense, fumbling notwithstanding. So that was my point. I think he would do a great job in New England, and I think it's going to come down to New England, us, or retiring, to be honest.
I think so. I don't really care how he does. I mean, he'll probably get like 600 to 800 yards and do something, nice and respectable and contribute and be fine, and that'll be, good for him, and he'll get his whatever money. I really want him to sign with the Saints because it'll piss off the kind of Vikings fan that I hate.
Me?
No, the people who still think the Saints are the ones we should be hating. Like, Greg Williams has gone through 2 teams since that. Hate that guy. I don't care what uniform they wore when they did it. Hate the people. It's also been 8 years. Like, it's time to stop hating a random other team in the NFC.
Sean Payton's
and they've
there.
also created they are the biggest bastion of mediocrity since Jeff Fisher. They've been 7-9 for 4 years. Like, they have been punished. And if Adrian Peterson went to the Saints and put up 750 yards, it would piss off just the worst people, and that would make me so happy.
Isn't Sean Payton still there though? He kind of oversaw that whole thing.
I don't know if he knew anything. I think that was the whole deal. Is that Greg Williams kind of kept it from him, and he should have had better tabs on his subordinates or whatever. But that wasn't
going to be my point.
There's 6 people that are more responsible for it than him.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like people still. I know a lot of people that still really hate the Cowboys, and I hate the Cowboys too, but for different reasons.
Please.
They hate them because of 75, and I hate them just because the America's team thing just is obnoxious to me. But
yep. And there's Jones.
Yeah.
There's plenty to hate Jerry Jones about.
And I'm not a big Texas person to begin with, but it wouldn't break. I mean, I write about it hyperbolically on the website. I wrote an article about him leaving without a contract this morning, and I was like, thank God, but Yeah, it wouldn't bother me the way it would if he went to Green Bay, for example.
That would be an insult to Vikings fans. I don't think the Saints would be at all, but some people would take it as one, and those people deserve to be offended.
What if he went to the Packers and they won the Super Bowl at U.S. Bank Stadium?
Well, that's the prophecy. That's exactly what's going to happen.
Well, I think
I think the Packers already explicitly were like, nah.
Well, that's a possibility. So I think we need to talk about like when that happens, who's going to take over the site when I just walk face first into the river and never come back. That would be the worst thing that could ever happen.
We'll sell it to a Packers owner.
TotalPackers.com guy.
You went there.
I had to. It's dominating my subconscious. I can't help it. I'm having really weird dreams. Going back to needs, I did want to ask you a little bit if you have any input on this, but it seems like they did meet with like a ton of safeties too.
There are so many safeties. This class is insane.
Yeah, man. So I was wondering like what your thoughts were on that. I know people obviously have always been looking for like another dominant safety to play along Harrison Smith.
So here's the great thing about all these safeties. So there's like 5 first-round safeties, and there are not 5 teams that are going to take a safety in the first round. So it's very likely that like a very good safety falls to the Vikings. And almost all of these guys can also play nickel cornerback, which is a need right now. Or at least we need to like bring somebody to compete with Mackenzie Alexander. It kind of seems like they really want him to be the starting slot corner, nickel corner. But he needs to earn that like over somebody. He can't just be like, I'm competing with Jabari Price. So these safeties, like Budda Baker is the guy that I really, really want. And there's another name of Obi Melifonwu, who had an amazing combine, but doesn't have very good tape, and some team is going to overdraft him because of that and take him over Budda Baker.
What's with these
Budda
names?
Baker, it's such a good name draft, man.
Seriously, it's awesome. It kind of makes me feel better about losing Captain Munderland, too, from a name perspective.
That's true, yeah. Well, no, we'll be all right.
You prefer a safety over the nickel corner because I'd rather see him go after. Yeah, I thought, what's the other safety's name?
Well, you can try both in training camp and see what happens.
Right. I guess I'd rather Zendeju. I thought he played all right last year.
Oh, definitely. He's going to be 30 though.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So yeah, no, Zendeju's fine, but like,
what do you think would help the defense more, bringing in a dominant safety alongside Harrison Smith, or bringing in a dominant nickel corner?
I think nickel corner would fill a larger deficit because like Mackenzie Alexander is a worse player than.
That's what I was trying to say. Yeah.
Yeah, but like, so these guys, they are primarily safeties, but then they can also have all the tools and skills to play nickel corner. Wow. So Budda Baker is a guy, I think he's the 5th on a lot of boards, the 5th safety, but he's definitely a first-round caliber talent. There's just 4 other ones that are even better. And there's a chance he falls to 48 because of Obi Melifonwu, who isn't as good as Budda Baker coming out of college, but he had a ridiculous combine, and somebody's going to fall in love with that. There's another name, Marcus May, who kind of is argued maybe a 2nd-round guy, maybe a 3rd-round guy, but he's very balanced. A guy named Marcus Williams is also a safety. He's more of a free ranger kind of center fielder. He's not as good in the run game, which I know the Vikings aren't as interested in. They want a balanced safety. But it could be something, and then you kind of have Harrison Smith play your dedicated strong safety and be in the box more, and that isn't like the worst thing in the world. Those are kind of the names. They met with a guy named Josh Jones, who is not part of this great name draft.
On NC State?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, he's from NC State.
NC State.
Yeah.
They met with him. He would be a 3rd-round guy, and he's kind of also a very balanced safety. He wouldn't be the guy we have to spend our number 48 pick on. We could get him with one of our 2 3rd-rounders because there are just so many, but he would be like a high 2nd-rounder in another draft.
I was going to end it on that, but it got me to – there was one more thing I wanted to touch on, and it feeds into this anyway, but this is kind of older news that we would have covered last week, but we weren't on last week because I'm bad at my job. But, obviously Sharif Floyd, we found out that Sharif Floyd has nerve damage from either his injury or his surgery. I didn't –
We should have probably led with this.
Seriously, and I wanted to say, obviously looking at the players that they met with, they've been meeting with a lot of defensive tackles, and the Floyd thing dominates a lot of what's going to happen. I mean, that's such a big question mark, and it sucks. So what do you? I guess the question is for Joe first. Do you think? I guess how does that affect what they're going to do in the draft and the defense as a whole? I mean, have you heard anything? Like, is he for sure done, or are they? I know like they're saying his quad just isn't healing and it doesn't work right, which is like scary.
It's not getting any information from the nerves, which is bad.
So like he's basically he would like walk in circles because his leg doesn't work.
They got Dayton Jones as a placeholder, kind of more so than Truesdale, whatever his name is, which allows them to, I still think they got to go after if there's a young defensive tackle there available.
Ooh, baby. I'll talk about him in a minute.
Yeah, I think they got to grab him. The Packers, Dayton Jones, I mean, he will go in there and be a starter on day one, but they need to develop somebody else at that position and get another beast if he's out there. So that's what I would think they do.
And that's not
a beast, you say?
Is that his natural position? I know they're asking him to gain weight to play there. Is he naturally an outside guy that can play inside, or is he an inside guy that can play outside?
Probably is most naturally a defensive end, but can play inside just fine.
Okay.
Like a bigger defensive end or a smaller 3-tech, but it's, somewhere in there.
So who are the guys you like in the draft?
So maybe my favorite player at number 48, like the guy I want the most, and he's kind of a pipe dream, but he might slide to 48. His name's Malik McDowell. He played for Michigan State.
Yay. And
he's if it weren't for what I'm about to talk about, he would be like a top 10 talent. Like he is like he's gotten Jadeveon Clowney comparisons. Like he's ridiculous.
They did meet with him too.
They did meet with him. He was like the entire Michigan State defense. There's I'm about to come out with an article talking about a bunch of guys, and in that article there's a link to a really, really good film breakdown from Brett Kallman about it. He was a one-man army on Michigan State's defense, but Michigan State had a terrible season. They went 3-9, and toward the end of the season, once they were like clearly out of contention for anything, he kind of shut it down. And there's a lot of effort questions and motor questions and kind of this character issue thing. So they met with him, and I can tell you he's either probably one of the top guys on their board, like one or two guy on their board, or he's off it entirely depending on how that meeting went. A lot of people have said he's been really bad in interviews too, and they don't really like him. And it's kind of a lot of quotes that look a lot like very similar to the quotes they said about Mackenzie Alexander last year, or the quotes they said about Mike Zimmer himself.
So that's a good thing. I mean,
he like everybody hates him, but the Vikings, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean,
he might fall to 48, even though he's a top 10 talent. And if he can be in a locker room that can like make it, he's young. I think he's going to be 21 when the season starts. He's very young, very talented, and if he's in a locker room with like Brian Robeson and Everson Griffin, I have no doubt that those guys can mentor him. Not to mention Mike Zimmer, and most importantly, Andre Patterson, who's had an amazing track record of developing defensive linemen.
And Trey Waynes.
Well, that's Jerry Gray's thing, man. Keep it to the position.
I know, but they played together, so maybe that they could bond over that.
Oh, that's right. He went to Michigan State. Yeah, I suppose, sure. But yeah, like he's. Did they play together? Because he's a junior. I think he might have been a freshman.
I mean, they probably know one another at least.
Probably. But yeah, I am in love with this guy, and I really think his effort. He needs to land in the right locker room, and I think Minnesota is that right locker room. 48 is kind of a stretch for him to fall. He'll fall a lot because of his effort issues, but I don't know if he'll fall this far. But he is my favorite guy. Like, screw offensive lineman. I want this guy.
Well, yeah, it seems that, it's a good and a bad thing that he's bad at interviews, because otherwise he wouldn't be available. But why not replace Shreve Floyd with another guy that's top 10 talent that fell for different reasons? But
yeah. There's plenty of like defensive tackle depth in this class, but a lot of them are more suited to be nose tackles. Like they're bigger, 0-tech, 1-tech guys, and we need like a 3-tech kind of a shoot the gap and rush the passer kind of guy. So right now, we do still have Steven, and Tom Johnson is a year older, which kind of sucks. So if we get like a young guy that isn't a guy we pick at 48, we'll be okay. But I would love to just get, like, Malik McDowell could step in and play just as well, if not better, than Sharif Floyd was playing at his healthiest.
Wow. So if someone put a gun to your head and you live in LA, so that's a strong possibility.
It's true.
Who do you think right now is obviously it's fluid and it's going to change, so I'm not going to hold it to you or make fun of you for it much. Who do you think that the Vikes are going to end up drafting?
At number 48?
Yeah.
God, that's hard. Dan Feeney.
Okay.
Dan Feeney's been the guy I've seen mocked the most. He's a guard from Indiana. He has a concussion issue that some people are really worried about. He had one concussion this year that kept him out for 5 games, which usually indicates that he's had a lot of other concussion issues, but he has no other reported concussions, and sometimes concussions are just like that. They just last a long time, and it doesn't really mean anything more than that.
Justin Moore.
I don't follow him. Yeah.
Oh, he had a concussion that lingered so long that, for 3 years he couldn't even play. I mean,
Jesus.
That happens to people, so I'm not sure if that's 5 games is...
I have no idea.
If he still has, lingering
Nobody knows.
issues
Medicine doesn't know.
Yeah, brain injuries, man, they're awful.
Yeah, but other than that, he's an immediate plug-and-play right guard. He can just immediately come in and beat out Jeremiah Searles and whoever else and be our right guard. Another guy that maybe we take, and this is the other, the closest, this is the thing that's made me say, oh God, because I can't choose, is Taylor Moton, who is, he played tackle at Western Michigan, and did, I know that's where Willie Beavers was, but it's okay. But he played tackle there, and he played guard for a little bit too, so he can play both, and he's, very athletic. He's a little bit raw, but not to the point where Willie Beavers was, or he was just straight up bad at football.
Yeah.
He can be a flexible complement to Mike Remmers and play either guard or tackle. So if you try to move him to guard and find out that's bad, you can try Remmers at guard and him at right tackle and kind of figure out which one of those is better. And that flexibility is super valuable, especially when you think about depth, and if one of them gets injured or whatever, that's super valuable. So he's another guy that I think could definitely be there. I think it sounds like both of those guys are going to be there, even though those are maybe the 2 best interior linemen outside of Forrest Lamp.
Yeah.
But just because of Feeney's concussion thing and the fact that he's an interior lineman and that's usually valued lower, incorrectly in my opinion, but it's usually valued lower. Those are 2 guys that I'm very interested in. And if I were to put my money on one guy, I'd say Dan Feeney, but obviously wouldn't feel very confident in it because we could go a bajillion different directions. I have no idea what they're going to do.
It's amazing. I mean, there's so many different options and needs, and I think the Vikings are doing a decent job of keeping people on their toes and not really showing their hand. But I have a random question. I don't expect either of you to have the answer to this, but it popped in my head when you were talking about this. I know when they brought in Sperano to kind of build the offensive line. What do you think the identity of our offensive line is? What are they going for? I know they said Sperano liked mauling, big, aggressive, physical offensive linemen. And I was wondering what if we even have that identity right now based on the guys that we had, if we brought in different guys out of desperation. I don't necessarily think or know of
It's not Riley Reif.
I was just gonna say I don't know if that's Reif's identity.
Not at all. He's a finesse technique, move really mobile kind of guy, but he won't beat you with just pure power.
So I wonder how that's going to work, I guess, with the line, and if that's going to dictate who they go for, if they need somebody who fits more with what they've got begrudgingly. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I wouldn't. I don't think they're too worried about particular scheme or attitude or whatever. I think they just need to get players who can play football because they're kind of short on those.
Yeah, I think we're in a beggars can't be choosers situation, but I think I don't know. I thought maybe it would dictate who they're looking for, but not.
All these players are good in their own way, they've already got a guy like Boone playing next to a guy like Reif. Those are 2 very different styles of player.
For sure.
I don't think at that point it even matters. I don't even think there's a scheme or an attitude or a culture to fit on the offensive line. I think just get guys who are good at this.
To me that sounds really disconcerting. It seems like they got a bunch a hodgepodge of people, and it's how are they going to get that to work? I don't know. It was just something that popped in my head that made me scared. But yeah, Joe, do you have any idea? I mean, do you want to put that out there? And we should do this every week until we get closer, and then see who was right. It's going to end up being me regardless. But
I like the defensive lineman. You know, I don't think they'll go. I think Mixon's a smokescreen, and
I agree with you. I think he is.
I think if this guy's there, as Luke said, you know, that's the guy to take because that is suddenly a huge need on this team.
We have the worst luck.
It really is horrible. Like,
seriously, man.
So
like, how does
what
that
are
happen?
the odds that the one time a surgeon messes up, and don't construe that as me blaming the surgeon, because like that happens and surgery is really freaking hard, but like the one time it happens, it's to Sharif Floyd, and then the odds of an injury like Teddy Bridgewater's are well below 1%. And like Mike Harris too, so like our biggest needs are because of freak occurrences that have nothing to do with like decision making, and there's no reasonable way to prevent them. Like, how in the world does this keep happening? Can we stop having freak occurrences take our players out of the team?
It's just like, God.
Yeah, the identity of the Vikings offensive line from last year is ouch.
It's true. Somebody just came out with
Deer in a headlight.
There was a new injury metric that we led in 2016.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, big time.
There was like a new way of measuring it, and the Vikings had like the worst.
Was it a lost game something or other?
Yeah, some new something that I didn't know existed before.
Well, my answer is Curtis Samuel. As much as I do want Mixon, I'm gonna go with Samuel.
I think of the people we've talked about, he's probably the least likely to fall. But I would love it if we did draft him.
Samuel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of mocks where he goes in the 20s.
Yeah. I don't know. Mine's more based on hope than rational thought.
But I would love it. I mean, and you know, people would be angry because it's like, oh my God, you drafted another wide receiver, blah blah blah, because they haven't done any. He is not a wide receiver like Treadwell was a wide receiver, or like Diggs or like Thielen are. He is like he is closer to Ty Montgomery or Percy Harvin or like these other guys. I would love it though. It'd be real fun.
I reserve the right to change my pick during pick 47 on day 2 of the draft.
Oh, I'm not allowing that.
Yeah,
can I tease a piece based on this?
Well, first, let me just say that with the site, I've kind of touched on this, but we started a message board a couple weeks ago, and it's more of like an echo chamber of my loneliness right now. But a lot of people have been joining; they just haven't really been contributing. And
come answer the question. If you're listening to this podcast, come to the message board and answer the question: who do you think we're going to pick at 48?
And I'll
put down your name.
I'm putting that up right now, and I'll write an article about it too and post it
everywhere. And answer the question: what do you want to happen to Adrian Peterson? I'd love to hear.
Yes. Oh, I would love to hear everybody's opinions on that.
That's good too. We'll do both of those. But during the draft, we're going to be basically doing like a live. Last year we did a live chat, and this year we're going to do like a live party in the message board. So I wanted to just advertise that, and anyone that's listening obviously found this through our channel, so you'll see it. But hopefully you guys can join and then answer those questions too. But yeah, Luke, if you want to talk about your piece also.
I have a tease based on who we're going to pick at 48. So I made a bet with my dad. I made a bet with him last year where I had to like do a first round mock draft, and if I got close, if I was accurate enough, I won. And I forget how we scored it, but I won, and it was close. So this year, because we don't have a first round pick, we're doing it differently. He's given me 9 names, and if I name 9 players and one of them is our first draft pick, then I win, and he gets the field.
So you get 9 chances to pick who they
correct.
Take. Okay.
Yeah.
I like that.
So I've been like, that's a lot of what I've been doing for like researching the draft is trying to figure out who my 9 is going to be.
Okay.
So like Feeney is one, McDowell's one, Curtis Samuel's in there. So that's going to come out probably very close to where the draft is because
is Mixon in there?
Mixon is in there right now. Even though I agree with Joe, it's all smoke. I feel like I had to put him on the list just in case I was wrong about that. But yeah, that'll come out soon, and it'll have a whole bunch of justification and links to information about all these players and stuff when that comes out. It'll be my 9 guys and who I think the Vikings will pick at number 48. And if they trade, I'm kind of screwed. But if they like trade up and get Curtis Samuel, I still win.
I should make a game of that in the message board and give people less than 9.
Do it.
See
if they could win my bet with my dad.
3.
And then maybe my dad will owe them a beer. That won't happen.
I'll replace the beer with which Joe Oberle has on his mantle, a Vikings guard gnome. Joe by default won our last
Do
year's
it.
fantasy league because
What do you mean by default?
because you didn't play me in the championship because I always
That's
blow it.
breaking news to me. I actually did not know that.
To the championship, dude. Nice alternative facts.
That's how much. That's. I blew it, of course. I always have like the best record, and then I had Le'Veon Bell. I had like the three top running backs, and I blew it. I forget who the other one was. It's who did I
You
trade?
Zeke because of me.
Ezekiel Elliott. Yes, that's who. And Le'Veon Bell. And I blew
That
it.
is an all-time fantasy trade. I'm gonna tell my kids about that.
Yeah, that was amazing, man. It reminds me of the year that I had Tom Brady and Randy Moss the year that they broke all those records, and I lost in the first round that year too. Just like I did, I always lose in the first round. I can't handle it. But the point is that we can do that, and then whoever is right gets a Vikings gnome because those things are sweet. Even though I don't yet own one because I keep giving them away to people. So we'll do that.
So
but
you keep losing them.
yeah, pretty much. I'm not allowed at Mystic Lake anymore. I told them to take my picture and not let me go in because I have the worst luck in the world.
It is sweet, by the way. The gnomes.
They look bigger than you'd think,
Yep, it's awesome.
and it's only like 25% lead, so that's pretty cool. But I wanted to end the show again with my story from college. So everyone, if you want to sit down and listen, I'm kidding. Anyway, that's the show for the week. I think we're kind of getting to the end of people's humoring and
Nobody is
interest
listening
in us.
anymore.
I know.
That's for sure.
Go wild.
That's how I feel.
Yeah, go wild.
The most free. I got bad news. The Wild are losing right now.
Thanks for the spoiler there,
not
bud.
not to spoil it for people recording it, but
Not chill.
I'm a Red Wings fan, man. I gotta bring you guys down a notch or two. Bring you to my world. But anyway, thanks for listening to the people who did, and check us out next week. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Facebook, and please, for the love of God, check out our message board. Thank you for listening. Skol.